Hey guys, how's it going? What do I have here? I have two Commodore monitors. On the left we have a Commodore 2002. This was one I think that originally came with the C128. And on the right I have a Commodore 1084S. This is a D variety, so made by Daewoo. This is late model, kind of the white color, came with the Amiga 4000 series of computers. The reason why we're taking a look at both these monitors is this 1084 I really like, but it has quite a worn out CRT. The picture is just not very bright and it's not very sharp. This monitor, the 2002 on the other hand, has a nice bright sharp picture, but unfortunately this computer monitor has had a very rough life. The front door is missing, which is pretty common on these particular monitors. But you get worse yet is this monitor's obviously been dropped, because on the corner here there's a big crack here, there's a crack there. There's a chunk missing from the monitor here where you can no longer attach a screw. There's a scratch here. It's just generally had a hard life. Now, this monitor has a decent set of inputs. It only has mono sound, but it does have digital and analog RGB inputs, which is very nice, selectable right here. And it has the composite plus S-Video style input that Commodores all have. Here's the 1084S D2. It's made in August 1992. It has a good set of inputs as well, very similar to the Philips version of this monitor. So we have stereo audio, and we have composite, and we have the S-Video or Chroma Luma video. So that's a bit annoying that this monitor does not support TTL RGB, which is useful for me because I have a lot of old PCs and Tandies that do output TTL RGB. Now back to why we're looking at these two monitors. What I want to try to do is see if the CRT picture tube itself from this can go into this monitor and I can swap it over. I think this has a pretty low number of hours. This monitor works very well when it comes to sharpness. This one is really worn. This guy I got this from, he used the Amiga a lot and the monitor's worn out. So let's crack the covers open and just take a look and see what I can see. Okay, disclaimer time. Make sure you know what you're doing when you're working with CRTs. There are voltages that can kill you in here. You have to discharge the CRT before you do any of this. So don't even take the back off the cover off the back of the monitor unless you know what you're doing. This red wire here is the high voltage lead from the flyback transformer, and the CRT is a big capacitor. It's a transformer. It's a big capacitor, and even when it's off for a long time, there can still be very dangerous high voltages. And when it's running, we're talking 20,000 volts. You get that across your heart and you can die. Okay, both of the monitors are off, the covers are off, and I've removed the neck board on both of them just to take a look at things. So I've never actually done a successful tube swap before. I've seen videos of people doing it, so I have no idea what's going to happen here. But essentially, there's a couple different things you can do. You can take the CRTs and swap them and keep the yoke, and of course you're keeping the neck board from the electronics, and you're just swapping the glass picture tube around. I've seen some videos where they said you had to switch the yoke as well, like the yoke needs to stay with the picture tube. So this yoke this is the 2002, we got to have this yoke working on this electronics. And if you unplug the yoke, you get these 4-pin connectors. It's similar on both, same kind of colors. We have red, blue, green, and yellow wires, but the pinouts are actually slightly different. Even though the connector is about the same compatibility wise, one of the pins is actually in the wrong spot. But that's something to consider. But there's more we have to consider. Let's get a closer look. So a deflection yoke is just a magnetic coil, and to move the yoke between the two electronics, so we're talking about the drive board, the resistance that it's expecting has to be similar. I don't really know how close, but if it's wildly off, it's clearly not going to work. So let's measure, this is the Daewoo monitor here, let's measure the one coil, this is the blue and the red coil. So 2.16 ohms, 2.14 ohms. Okay, it fluctuates a little bit. On the one deflection coil, let's check the other one. 10.9. Okay, let me quickly check the other monitor and I'll report back. Okay, here's what I found. We have 2.36 and 10.9 on the 1084 and 2.18 and 8.7 on the 2002. So there is a little bit of a difference, especially on this one. I don't know if that's going to cause an issue. Can I add a 2 ohm resistor to bring this one up to 10.9? Will that help? I don't really know. But I also know that, these are both similar picture tubes, and maybe I can just, reuse the existing yoke and see what happens. I don't know. Okay, so that's one issue. Let's move on to the next things that potentially could be roadblocks here. Now, these are both 13-inch CRTs, so generally, as far as I understand, these connections here on the back of the neck are very similar on most color picture tubes these days. And looking at this pinout, it totally matches here. There's the same amount of pins, so there's basically 10 pins. You have, this one has a little bit of a notch right there. You see that key, and there's a pin inside. The other one doesn't have this plastic, but it has a pin, and this all looks identical. So, from my understanding, this is pretty much going to be plug and play. We can just put the CRT from, we can put this neck board onto the other CRT, and that's going to work. And this is the other CRT, and here's what I mean. So you notice it doesn't have the little notch here. It's a bit hard to see because of the light, but there's no notch, but the pin is there, and the same on here. This just has a hole there for that pin, but it doesn't have the cutout. So I actually wouldn't be able to put this neck board onto that CRT unless I pull this. Sometimes there's a little plastic thing that goes on here, which is essentially like the little thing with the key. I have to pull that off in order to use this neck board. That neck board should fit on this without any issue, even without that little spacer thing. None of this may work, and small might blow up. So this is the next roadblock, and it's the way the CRT is mounted. And these are the mounting tabs. There are four, one on each corner, and you can see they kind of are attached to this implosion band. This silver band here is the implosion band, and they come off, and this is how it screws onto the case. Now these vary from monitor to monitor. Sometimes the screw mount is like up here on this direction. Sometimes it's further out. It sometimes doesn't even have it at all. So this is what determines where the CRT is positioned in the case. And clearly, if these are wrong, the CRT is not even going to fit. So these look similar, and I don't know enough about CRTs to know if these vary by 2-3 millimeters from one picture tube to another. I don't really know. None of this may work, and I might basically take these CRTs out of these cases and try to mount them, and they're just not going to work. I guess the only way I can find out is to literally yank these out and just go from there. And I'm not really going to show much of the removal process, but it's pretty simple. You essentially make sure you disconnect all of the cables, which would be like this, and you have to remove the high voltage anode cable, and this is one that's dangerous. You got to make sure you know what you're doing. And sometimes there are wires like this that are just clip tied, zip tied. This is the or degaussing coil, so that just usually unplugs like that. And there's typically always a ground strap. So this silver wire here is the DAG ground, and somewhere here, so this black wire here is what connects to the DAG ground, because the DAG ground is actually soldered onto this neck board. So some monitors, it's actually something you can remove. Let's take a look at the other one. So we got the high voltage anode. Here's the DAG ground. This is the coil. So degaussing coil. Probably it's this wire right here, which is sticky. So that just comes right off like that. So that's nice. These are the ground wires, these two black cables here. And actually, yeah, so they are just connected on with a connector to the neck board here. So I can just pull those off easily enough. Do not ever run a CRT without that ground connected. That is absolutely essential. You can fry the transistors, the drive transistors and stuff in here if you don't have that connected. That's all part of this entire, capacitor scenario. I'm probably saying some stuff wrong, and I apologize. People will correct me in the comments. Yep, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug that stuff, and I'm going to pull these two CRTs out. I'm going to leave the yokes on, but I'm going to pull them out completely. Alright, it wasn't too hard to get these two things out. Like observations are, this is from the 1084, and you see that it has the degaussing coil still on the monitor. It's sort of this weird half-size one. See, it loops around here. While if we look over at the old husk of the 2002, the degaussing coil itself, it just sits inside the monitor frame. There it is. So these are the two picture tubes next to each other. But I gotta say, if we move that and we slide these near each other, the mounting tabs definitely look compatible. Yes. So this is what I was talking about as the little plastic kind of spacer thing. So that should come off, because this is just like a vacuum tube, And vacuum tubes have connections that look like this. See, it sort of has nothing on it. But this, I think, is just a cap. And the glue, see this white glue they put on here is sort of like a soft silicone stuff. I can pick that off. I think that's what's holding that on. Well, here is the Toshiba tube from the 2002 mounted in the 1084. I took the little spacer thing from the back of the tube off, and this should, see, you can see it's filled with this goop, but it should go on to here without too much issue. Yep, there we go, perfect. And this now goes right on, there we go. Okay, so things I did. I transferred the degaussing coil from the other monitor onto this one, so it's sort of in a similar situation. And I also changed the DAG ground over. So, shoot. Here is the ground cable from the other monitor, and they typically just sort of loop around the ears, like there to there, and they kind of spread across. And then this is the ground cable that goes to the neck board. So I just took the one off the other monitor. So here it is here, goes down there. There's a spring down there on this corner, and it goes to over here, down onto that one. And then it connects, these are the wires right here, and this connects to the neck board. So all we're left with at this point is figuring out the yoke situation. Okay, here we are. So this is that Orion picture tube from the 1084. This is the 2002. High voltage anode is connected. I haven't powered anything up yet. I have the DAG ground right here. See, I just soldered it together temporarily. And then as for the deflection coil, this is the deflection coil right here from the original, not from the 2002, this is from the 1084, and I swapped the pins around. So this is the same connector, but I just moved this blue wire over one. So on the front, looks pretty good. You know, this isn't exactly 100% flush. See, I can push on it, it makes it flush. Although, I think it was like that originally. But generally, it's pretty good. There's no gap. So, it's a little bit darker, this CRT, than the other one. And we're gonna power this up and just see what happens. It might cause a fire, and if it does, I have a fire extinguisher nearby. And I'll be ready to pull the power out of the wall very quickly. Okay, I have a test pattern generator connected. This is the CRT from the 1084S, but it's in the 2002. It's all connected, and I'm gonna turn this on for the first time, and we're gonna see what happens. And sorry for the camera being dark. I have it locked at 60 Hertz, so we don't have the strobing on the camera. Here we go. Okay. It all sounds normal. Look at that. Wow, okay. Okay, so here's the 2002 with the CRT from the other monitor in it, and as you can see, it's working well. I had to swap the green and yellow wire to get the picture to not be kind of flipped, but otherwise it looks good. Good as in looks kind of crappy because it looked kind of crappy in the other monitor as well. The only issue I'm having here is if we put a full field on, let me zoom in, you got some retrace lines at the top here. Now what might be happening is I just have a little bit of geometry issues, and I haven't adjusted the geometry at all yet. I might fiddle with this, but you know what? This gives me hope that it's going to work well on the other monitor, so I'm going to put that one together and we're going to see what happens. Here we are with the 1084. I haven't plugged it in. I mean, well, it's plugged in, but I haven't turned it on yet. And here we go. Maybe it's going to blow it up, but it didn't work that well this monitor anyway, so here we go. High voltage is running. Green light is on. Okay, so that doesn't look so hot. Okay, yeah, I've poked around and I'm not quite sure what's going on here. I understand the geometry being different, and that probably has to do with, you know, the resistance and the coils are different. But what is happening with this weird line pattern? Definitely this monitor did not have this problem with the original CRT. I gotta say, the color and the brightness, for what it is, looks a lot better with this picture tube than it did with the other one. But at this point, we're gonna have to swap the yokes around. I don't think there's any way to avoid this problem here. That's not too hard because it just slides off the back and the other one slides on, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, this is interesting. It's working, just not great. Here's what the CRT looks like without the deflection yoke on. So here's the deflection yoke that originally came with this CRT here. It's pretty easy to take off. There's a single screw here, and it's mounted like this, and you just sort of gently pull it off. But before you pull that off, you have to pull this convergence ring off here, and this is what adjusts all the convergence. And I did make a scribe with a black marker here and here so that I can put this back on. I'm going to keep this on here with the other deflection yoke, just see what happens. Maybe mix and match as necessary. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Sometimes there's a little bit of glue. You can see this had a little bit of this hard glue here, kind of holds it on, but this is an old picture tube and it just came right off here. Okay, so I've swapped the deflection yoke over, but I'm using the convergence ring from this CRT, but the deflection yoke from the other monitor. I swapped the pins around. It's all plugged back in. Let me just double check. Everything looks good. Yep, DAG's connected, deflection's connected, power's on. Let's turn the monitor on. See how it looks now. Okay, yes, much better. Well, I'm not going to know how well this works for sure until I plug an RGB signal into this, but that's nice that it's deflecting properly now. Okay, it's not perfect, it's a little bit off right here, but I did notice that the other CRT had a couple kind of magnets stuck onto the edge of the outside of the CRT, probably to fix convergence. I might just peel those off and stick those on. Also, it looks a little twisted, but that's just because when I put the deflection coil yoke on, it didn't do it very well. So this is great. I'm successful tube swap. So what I gotta do is get an Amiga out or some kind of RGB signal and feed that into this thing so we can really see a pure RGB so we know that it's working or not. But okay, so I hooked up the Atari ST here, and one of the things I noticed right away is when it's displaying a white screen, so if I reset the computer here, it's a little bit kind of discolored over there. Now, on the other CRT were these two magnets that were taped on. And sure enough, if I hold one of these up in the same spot where it was on the other one, which was one was over the label, that's actually fixed the problem down there, and the other one was down below. So I'm going to tape these two on in the same spot. There must be something with this chassis that causes that effect. Alright, both monitors are fully back together and working well. So essentially here we have the 2002 closest to us. This has the Orion picture tube that came out of the 1084S D2, but the deflection yoke is from the 2002 originally, but the convergence assembly is from the picture tube, this Orion picture tube, so it came from the other monitor, and then everything else, of course, is from this monitor. And on the other one over here, essentially it's the same thing. The picture tube is a Toshiba tube now that came out of the 2002, but the deflection yoke is the one that was originally on there, but the convergence assembly is the one that was originally on the Toshiba. So looking here at the 2002 but with the Orion tube, you'll see the label looks a little torn there, and what happened is that tube had two magnets that were taped onto it, and it seemed like those were actually necessary for proper white uniformity in this chassis. So the 1084 chassis must have some kind of magnetic imbalance. So I peeled those stickers off, those magnets off, and I taped them onto the tube here and I sort of moved them around until I had good uniformity. But that's sort of strange. I don't really see what exactly is causing that, but maybe there's the transformer down there, or I'm not sure. But there they are. I'm just going to put a little more tape on those to hold them on better. That's using electrical tape. And this monitor doesn't appear to need them, but I don't particularly care. So there we go. That worked. Tube swapping, two Commodore monitors from different vintages, different brands, everything worked. All you got to do is just keep trying to make sure it physically fits, and like I said, do the deflection yoke swap if you need to. There you go. If I were going to do this again, I would probably immediately go for the deflection yoke, where I would keep the original deflection yoke with the circuitry in the original monitor, so I wouldn't have even tried swapping it. That was just a waste of time. I would just move the CRT, the picture tube itself, and the convergence assembly over, and that's it. And this is a great way to bring an old monitor back to life, one that wasn't working so well. I hope you found this interesting at all, and I learned a lot by making this video. So thank you for watching. Put your comments and questions in the comment section down below, and thumbs up if you liked this video, and thanks for watching. Bye.